At first, everything was new and exciting in Vietnam. But over time, that honeymoon feeling, it fades away and fast.
Today I'm going to talk about a fascinating fact. That's the fact that only a fraction of first-time visitors return to Vietnam.
Today, what I want to talk about is a video review of a older video that was recommended to me about 4 months ago. I'm just now getting to it, so I apologize. But I think right now, with the comment sections going on how they have been, the live streams having a lot of debate about the reality of living in Vietnam, this is the perfect time to finally sit down and break down this video and talk about the negatives of Vietnam, but how you can avoid them and how you can really enjoy life past the honeymoon stage. Because once you hit that 5 to 7 years, you're going to grow up. You're probably going to quit drinking. And you're going to start seeing that the pollution, the chaos, the noise, the traffic, the work environment, and all of this stuff wasn't what you originally thought it was. But I'll leave the link below so you can check out the full video on itself. It's a great video. He goes over a very professional aspect of living in this country and how he dealt with it and how he moved forward through the situations. Today, I'm going to give you my insight on how you can better prepare yourself for these situations. So when that honeymoon phase does end for you, you're not going to be lost, stuck, or worst of all, angry and leaving. Now, when you first come out to Vietnam, we all run into this honeymoon phase. When you first come out here, you see the wild cities, the beautifulness of the countryside. You see the amazing parties. If you've been lucky enough to get yourself into a Vietnamese wedding, you see how chaotic and fun that stuff is. The traditions and the old culture style dances, music, and everything like that. So we're going to address that big question of tourism versus expat life. And again, expat life isn't being here for a month, isn't being here for a year, it's being here long term. So what is it like to be here after those 3, 4, 5, 6 years? The first impression of Vietnam, it blows your mind. It's beautiful, it's chaotic, it's crazy. There's so much noise, there's so much flair, there's so much smells, taste, so much is going on. All your senses are out of control and your body, your mind don't know what to do with it. And we're kind of like kids at a circus. Now, the big issue with this is when you move here in your early days, you're going to see a lot of stuff, have fun with it, but it does wear off on. And when the biggest things that typically wear off on people that stresses them deals with a lot of the noise and the traffic. Now, luckily for you guys, traffic is changing. As of 2025, running red lights is in fact illegal. The police are setting up new cameras all over the country, and they're finding between 5 to 20 million per incident, and they are following it to the T. So this is definitely changing that aspect of traffic being such a bad thing in Vietnam. But what about the other things, the cheap food and the cheap bar nights out? This stuff I've learned personally. After about a couple years, you start really getting off of the going to Bui Vinh. You start getting off of the tourist sites. You don't go to walking streets no more. This typically deals with just the chaos and the loudness, the pollution, the screaming, the bar girls. You start realizing what's going on. You start seeing the same girls. You start seeing the same stuff. For me, I made a lot of local friends. I started going to a lot of Vietnamese weddings and I started going to like house parties, which is I believe, a better way to live in Vietnam. If you want to see how the culture is, especially with the uncles and aunties, start going to house parties. Start going to people's houses for karaoke nights, weddings, and stuff like that. This is something you should be doing. So when you first come out here, make local friends. This will pay off in dividends in the long run. And while we speak of the nightlife, we also have to address things for cleanliness, the drinking culture, and what goes on in those situations. The drinking culture in Vietnam, we start to realize, is the drinking in Vietnam is a non-stop thing. It isn't on the weekends for the average person in Vietnam. Drinking is something that happens every night. Think of your uncle back home that used to come home every night and have 5 beers and just pass out. This is kind of the idea, and it doesn't really end. When you come out here as an expat, and I meet a lot of expats, especially older ones that don't really drink anymore, or they kind of grown up and they stop drinking, they start fading away. When you get to this point, Vietnam is going to become very lonely because expats that come out here are typically new. They want to go party. If you're going to be out here long term, you're going to want to date. start meeting these prospect women or girlfriends or boyfriends before you get to this stage. Once you get past the drinking and the nightlife of Vietnam, there isn't really too much to do. Now, when it comes to tourism versus long-term living out here, what's your first impression? When we first come out here, you see a bunch of these videos about getting scammed, overpriced. Bien Thanh Market in District 1 is a great example. You go there, buy a shirt, it's $25. But if you go down the road to a Vietnamese market, it's $1.50. Once you get here long term, you will start understanding where scams are happening. They're not as obvious as a lot of people think. And Vietnamese deal with scams as well. It is pretty much an ongoing thing. So being out here long term, definitely start making friends in your neighborhood. Start understanding what is a scam. It's not just taxis and street markets, it's everything. The long term living out here, you will start seeing the cost of living actually go down because you learn what not to pay. The next one is overcharging and scams. This is something that affects tourists and locals. You won't find many Vietnamese shopping where we shop as foreigners as tourists, but you will find them in local markets, but they are still haggling prices. You still see a Vietnamese person in Sapa trying to buy some vegetables and beef at the side of the road, having to negotiate the cost. This is something that just happens in Vietnam. There is no sticker price on 90% of stuff you buy. Well, start understanding what things should cost. You're never going to get the best rate. And sometimes you don't want to pay the best rate because if you start getting low, you start lowballing people, they're going to start lowballing the quality to you. And this also kind of pushes out when you start living here long term. If you guys have come out here and just got the Western accommodations where everything's kind of taken care of, they say it's Western because they give you a microwave or something like that, you're going to pay higher fees. When you move here and start living in actual housing and like apartments that Vietnamese do, you're going to deal with another scam within the utility bill section. So if your bill is like, well, it's typically like 3K per kilowatt, right? They might charge you like 6 or 7. So they'll pay the utility bill, but they actually profit off your electricity usage, even though they don't actually do anything. So these are other things you get with. The way to get through that is when you're living in these spots. This typically only works in housing. Get the bill directly from the person. They come to your house door to door. The same with the trash, the same with the water. They come to your door, they check the meter, they give you the bill from their little printer. If you're getting that, you're going to be good. If you're living in like apartments and stuff like that, even Vietnamese have to deal with this, where the homeowner will just give you an average bill. He'll get the total bill for the entire building and divide it by the rooms. So that's another scam to kind of look out for. And just a little advice when it comes to the actual getting scammed, because again, this is something that happens, the middleman thing with the condos or even locals getting scammed by the actual street markets themselves. Make sure you have small money. If you start giving people 500Ks everywhere, you are not going to get the right amount. Also, it's very common if you go to a store and you buy like a Pepsi hypothetically and you give them a 50K and all they have is like 40, but the soda is 8K. They owe you 2, but they don't have it. They'll just give you like a piece of candy or gum or something like that, which is probably not even worth anything. When I walk around, I always have like a small amount of money. These are literally like pennies and nickels in the US dollar equivalency, but I always have the exact amount of money. So when I need to pay small, I have it. There's no scams. And if people start realizing that they can cheat you like this, they're going to keep pushing that envelope. The next one is food and hygiene. This is something that I have seen battles go on in my Discord. This is things I've seen in my member section, and this stuff I see in the comments of my video. Vietnam has some of the healthiest food on paper. It's vegetables, it's broth, it's meat, it's fruit. Ideally, this is God's food, right? Everything is natural and all that stuff. The problem with it, though, is the hygienic value of it. It's the preparation value of it. It's the reused oil. It's the gutter oils. It's selling pork and beef on the side of a road where semis and trains are driving by. It's the vegetables sitting out in the blistering heat with flies on it, laying their eggs on them all day. It's the restaurants not washing their hands after bathrooms. It's street vendors wearing the same glove for 15 hours a day and sometimes using it again the next day. There is no real way to avoid this. Even if you go to an expensive Pizza Hut or something like that, you're still dealing with the culture of it. Hygiene in Vietnam, being for food, showering, brushing your teeth, stuff like that, it's not practiced too much. And it's also not taught too much. If you do come out here and become a teacher for primary, secondary, or high school, you're going to realize real fast how much hygiene is not a thing. People typically go to a dentist once every few months just to get their teeth clean, and that's how they call themselves brushing their teeth every month. Like that's a real thing. When it comes to like the food and the hygiene of it, you have to be very careful. My advice for this is typically buy your food at the market. Make sure you boil all the water or boil all the vegetables. The fruit, make sure it's got a skin that you can take off. And when it comes to the meat, make sure you're cooking it a little more than you normally do. If you like it medium rare, take it up a notch. the pesticides, the fly eggs and stuff like that. You don't know about it. And there's something I talked about earlier called zombie meat. This is when meat's expired and it's been frozen. They defrost it and they sell it. This is very common in Vietnamese restaurants. This doesn't regulate itself down to just a cheap restaurant. These are the expensive hotels as well. This is another thing that you just can't avoid out here. So number 4, something that gets to me a lot, and I've not apologetically have came after some of the comments about this, and that's the trash and the pollution in Vietnam. Vietnam is one of the dirtiest countries in Asia for the population value. Obviously, the India and China are more polluted per se, but they also have 1.4, 1.6 billion people, each country respectively. In Vietnam, it's also a lack of giving a shit. People out here will throw trash on everything. They will burn plastic in the middle of the road. They will throw things out the windows. They will throw things outside their cars while they're driving, outside of buses, urinate on stop signs. They will poop on trains. This has happened a lot, actually. The new metro in Saigon, there's already like 3 or 4 reports of kids pooping on it publicly because they just think it's normal and the parents just walk away from it. So when it comes to the trash and the pollution, this is something I believe, from talking to so many people, my own experience, is you kind of accept it as just a third world problem in Vietnam. But when you start living here long term, you start realizing it's not a problem where the government needs to clean it up. It's not a problem where they lack the resources. You realize it's the people don't care. Majority of them are going to tell you, well, the government cleans it up for us. Oh, they have the lady that does it. Even though somebody else cleans it up, it never rings mentally that, hey, maybe I shouldn't throw shit on the ground. The idea is one piece of trash on the ground is a job for one other person. So they even think it's a benefit to throw stuff on the ground. Living here long term, you start having to accept that trash on the ground is a normal thing. When it comes to farm villages and fishing towns, you're going to start seeing people put trash in black plastic bags. They're going to put holes in the bag and pretty much throw it into the ocean and keep punching it until it floats down to the ground or sinks down to the ground. If you're an environmentalist, Vietnam's going to piss you off. I see so many Europeans come out here trying to clean up the beaches of Vung Tau. And at the end of the day, the Vietnamese just kind of throw more trash on it because it's just part of the culture. So this is something to be used to. It's not really anything that we as foreigners can do. And just to prove how fast this country can fix itself, this last week, the government said if you run a red light, there is a fine between 5 to 20 million Vietnamese dong if you run a red light. Almost overnight, people stopped at red lights. So this problem could be fixed. I strongly suggest penalizing people. 100K if you throw trash on the ground. 50K if somebody sends a picture of somebody throwing trash on the ground. Whatever it is. Make incentives, make snitch programs like they do in China, whatever it takes. When it comes to the air pollution, you can't do too much about it. Again, this is a factory-based country similar to China and India. So you're going to get smoggy air. Places like Hanoi have a lot of farming land, and it's right next to China where they burn a lot of crops. So you're going to get those seasonal like cloud moments. But the problem with Vietnam is when they burn crops, they also throw plastic and trash into it. They kind of try to like get 2 birds with 1 stone. So you're going to be battling with that air pollution. And then all the other types of pollution are typically going to be noise and stuff like that. Vietnam's a noisy country unnecessarily. You'll hear people yelling on their phones in a quiet room. You'll hear people walking around in a small elevator with their phone on speakerphone listening to a random YouTube video. Everything's loud here. Even when it doesn't need to be loud, it's loud here. This is one of those things about Asia that will make or break a Westerner, an expat rather. If you can't get used to it and get over it, you're never going to get over it, really. It is just something you have to accept. Now, the next one is service and customer service. This one comes up a lot, and I hear a lot of people say Vietnamese are the nicest people in the world. Vietnam's people in general are generally nice, especially in tourist areas. Once you get out of the local areas, it's going to be hit and miss. You're going to be nice people. I don't really know many rude or obnoxious Vietnamese people where they're just disrespectful intentionally. I'll go to a market somewhere in Hanoi and guy will just come by pushing me on his phone. So by nature, people out here are typically quite rude. Now, when it comes to the customer service, though, this kind of carries over. When you go to a shop, a restaurant, most of them are distracted by social media. So it's very hard to get their attention. There's always going to be slow service. You just have to get over that. There's going to be a lot of mistakes. This is why Vietnamese always check the bill before they pay it. There's always mistakes. And they're not upcharging your bill. Hopefully you don't catch it so they can charge more. There are always going to be mistakes with the orders, the foods, and then just attentiveness. Out here, things are always missing. You're always having to check people. You're always going to have to send people back. I've ran 3 different businesses out here where I've hired Vietnamese. And there was never a time where something got done and it was like, I checked it and we're like, cool, we got this. Let's go, guys. It was always, I had to check it 30, 40 minutes early because I knew there was going to be a bunch of mistakes. And it was typically the same mistakes. They were just trying to get it done real quick, hoping I didn't see it. Like, it was never like it wasn't nitpicky stuff. It was very basic stuff. So keep that in mind. Slow service, very unattentive. And a new trend happening in Vietnam now is when you go to a restaurant, they will throw a menu at you, throw a notepad and pen and walk away and go play on their phone. They expect you to write down your orders now. So that's something that's started going on here now. I see a lot of foreigners like backlashing on this. I saw this in Saigon actually. The Vietnamese would come over and just throw everything at them. And their Vietnamese wife or counterpart that was with them would be like, oh no, it's okay. We write down the order for them. And the foreigner would joke, like, do we go back there and cook the food too? Maybe I should tip myself. And it makes sense. You don't go to a restaurant having to do everything like that. I understand in America we have kiosks, you order on a computer and then somebody makes the food. Sure. But when you have to sit there and write down stuff, the staff will come back and ask what we meant about what we wrote down. It's just such stupid things. Expect that. And that kind of goes into more of the professionalism of customer service in Vietnam. It's pretty much non-existent at all. And the final part of this is tipping. Tipping in Vietnam is not a thing. If you tip, that's cool, whatever, good on you. It is not a cultural norm. Vietnamese do not tip. So when you tip, you will typically get staff trying to give you money back saying, oh, no, you give me too much or too little. You'll confuse them almost. And it's not a bad thing. Things like tipping is an American and European thing, if I'm not mistaken. If you want to tip somebody, understand in their mind, you're just randomly giving them money like they were homeless. You're not insulting them like that. But this is kind of the same comparison. You're just randomly giving some guy money. He doesn't understand you're giving him money for a good service. He doesn't understand you're giving him money because you are happy with your experience. He just thinks you're giving him random money. And if you start doing it a lot, people will just start expecting it, and you're not going to get a better service. Number 6 is the traffic, the transportation sidewalks. One thing about driving in Vietnam is the roads aren't typically regulated and, traffic laws, stuff like that. They are starting to crack down in 2025. So this is going to be different. If you are a foreigner out here, you do need to have a license. They are cracking on this very heavily, actually. And you have an international license, that's perfectly fine as well. But do be aware, if you're driving out here without a license, they pull you over. They can do a lot of stuff to you. And you bribing them to get out of it is starting to become a thing frowned upon within the government. In regards to sidewalks, they are getting better. South Vietnam has always been notorious for you can't use the sidewalks in Saigon because they're part of the road. Places like central Vietnam and Hanoi, like northern, people typically don't drive on sidewalks. They usually have high sidewalks. They have things on the sidewalk so bikes can't get through them. So it is more difficult, but it's also kind of common knowledge and respect not to drive on sidewalks when people are on them. So you will kind of deal with this more in the South, but this also makes it very hard to get your 10,000 steps in every day and stuff like that. I've actually had to cut back on my walking health and fitness and goals since I've come back to Vietnam because you just can't do it like you do in Singapore or Thailand or Cambodia or Laos. Vietnam sidewalks are not typically used for people. They're used for overflow. But in general, when it comes to traffic, my advice, download the Grab app and just use Grab. It's cheaper. You already know what the prices beforehand. There's no concerns. There's no issues. And your address, your location, where you're going, the Grab driver or the Vietnamese driver rather is going to know exactly where to go based off the GPS. So just use Grab. You're good to go. So in general, long-term living challenges out here really come down to just the frustration, the lack of consistency. Whenever you move in a house, things change around you, construction starts, cities never look the same after 5 years. The Sapa I know, you guys would never recognize. The Phu Quoc Island that I know, you guys would not believe was even a thing. So these are things that people have to recognize and respect when it comes to living out here long-term. I've met a lot of expats that have tried to defy this theory, move to Hoi An, which is a beautiful city, mind you. But after 3 to 5, 6 months, the city changes. The government changes something to a tourist area. The local people decide, hey, I'm bored. We're just going to get drunk and burn shit and karaoke every day for the next 3 months. So I always tell people that want to move out here long-term to retire, come out here for a year or two. Live where you want to be, wherever that city might be, and just truly be in it before you make that full commitment of going back home, selling the car, selling the houses and everything. Because Vietnam isn't what it is on a face value mark. It changes dynamically, and it's not always for the better. Which leads me to the term honeymooner. When I talk about honeymooning people, typically people that move out here for the first 1 to 5 years are out here being teachers, they're partying, they're having a good time. And Vietnam is an amazing country. And in those first 3 to 5 years, you are going to love your decision. You're going to love life. But after you hit that 5th year, that 6th year, that 7th year, and then once you skyrocket past all that, this is when life becomes real. This is when you start sobering up, possibly. This is when you start getting older. You start realizing you want to settle down. You want to marry somebody. You want to have a family, whatever this case might be. This is when you start realizing everything we've talked about today is no longer fun. It's no longer entertaining, no longer the guy on the weekend doing karaoke. It's no longer the yelling or the burning of plastics. It is now life, and it's your life. And with these things we've talked about today are part of that day to day, they just never end. And you start realizing your Vietnamese counterpart friends, which are 35, 40 years old, be it men or women, are still acting like they're 14 years old. You start realizing this might not have been what I thought it was going to be. So this is something to keep in mind. When I do say honeymooners, it is not an insult. It is just when you first come here, Vietnam is a beautiful country because it's new, it's fascinating, it's exotic, it's crazy, it's cheap. You could do what you want and it's a good life. In due time, it's going to wear on you. There's a reason why Vietnamese are trying to leave when they can. So with that being said, our conclusion, our final thoughts today. I know Vietnam is one of the best countries in all of Asia to come visit, and you have to come here, be it for teaching, tourism, or just hanging out for 2 or 3 years to kind of do your nomadic life. Whatever it is, your first 1 to 5 years are going to be amazing. Travel around different parts of Vietnam. Don't just come here to live in Saigon or live in Da Nang or just live in Hanoi. These are not the real Vietnam. These are major cities influenced by the West. So if you're curious about Vietnam, if you've never been here, definitely pack yourself up an e-visa, 3 to 6 month visas. They're easy to do. Fly out here, enjoy your time, get a job, meet somebody, get married, have fun out here, but do understand what the flaws are going to be. If you have any other questions, let me know in the comments below. Check the description for the original video of this reply. And if you want to get more into this, more detailed, definitely check out the members group. Hit the join button below. We have 3 different levels. This gets you into a private Discord plus a community tab where we talk about a lot of Vietnam and Southeast Asia, being teaching, backpacking, and just being a nomad out here. But with that being said, guys, I'm going to get out of here. Thanks for watching. I will see you again.